Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Comics the Gathering. It's your host Jesse, as always. Today we got another Commander deck tech for you. So this is a weird one because we're doing another deck tech on Calamax, but instead of being a pre-con upgrade, this is a full build-up out of my own mind. I kind of had this aha, like Eureka moment. And so I'm really excited to bring this to you today. This is also my first attempt at like a CEDH deck. I've never built a CEDH deck, so this is a nice little thought experiment for me. This is my ideas on it and what I got so far. If anyone wants to build this deck in paper, which this is a very expensive deck, there's no cheating that here, and you do get to actually play this in paper and test it out, comment down below. Let me know what you think. Let me know, how the deck plays, what changes you would make. But without further ado, let's get into the deck and what we're trying to do. So obviously, as I said already, we're doing Calamax the Stormsire, the Teamer 4-mana 4/4 elemental dinosaur that whenever you cast your first instant spell each turn, if Kalamax the Stormsire is tapped, you get to copy that spell. You may choose new targets for the copy. So whenever you copy an instant spell, you get to put a +1/+1 counter on Calamax. So this is ideally basically a storm deck. Our goal is to get a crazy high storm count and then storm off with several different win cons, and we have other things that kind of tie into the theme. So let's start with our enchantments. We're playing 3 of them. And the first one is one I'm really excited. I love this enchantment. I think it's one of the best things to come out of Ikoria, and that's Song of Creation. For 1 green, blue, red, you get a enchantment that says you may play an additional land on each of your turns. Whenever you cast a spell, draw 2 cards, and at the beginning of your end step, discard your hand. So obviously, if you're storming off, this is going to keep drawing you the cards to keep storming off. The only problem is it's not really getting you the mana to storm off, but it's going to get you the necessary card advantage to start going off. To help with that plan, though, we get an even crazier enchantment, which is 1,000-Year Storm. For 4 blue-red, you get an enchantment that says whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, copy it for each other instant and sorcery spell you've cast before it this turn. You may choose new targets for the copies. So this is going to be a way to make things that don't have storm, and more importantly, this is another way that maybe some of your finishers in here that normally can only kill 1 person can kill the whole table. And then our final enchantment is Wilderness Reclamation. We need several of these effects. We do kind of play like Teamer Reclamation, but way better. So that being said, if Teamer Reclamation and Storm had a baby, that's kind of where we're at. For those of you who don't know, though, Wilderness Reclamation is an enchantment, 3 and a green, for an enchantment that says at the beginning of your end step, untap all lands you control. Perfect. It's going to keep us going off, keep us doing our stuff. We're going to jump around a little bit. We're not going to go straight into the instance because that's where all the spice is. We want to get there towards the end. So next we're going to do our creatures. We're running a total of 8 creatures in here. Aside from our commander, we have Baral, Chief of Compliance. For 1 and a blue, you get a 1/3 human wizard that says instant sorcery spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. Obviously, that's going to help reduce the cost of a lot of what we're doing, so we can cast more spells in 1 turn. Also, little side note, you do have some counters in here, so whenever a spell or ability you control counters a spell, you may draw a card. If you do discard a card, that can come in handy. That does play into the game plan, but is not the main focus here. Up next, we have a Birds of Paradise. Classic mana dork here. For a green mana, you get a 0/1 flyer that says tap, add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. Goblin Electromancer, another staple of Storm. For a blue and a red, you get a 2/2 that instant sorcery spells you cast cost 1 generic less to cast. Stack that up with Baral. Stuff's getting real cheap real fast. Really like that. we have one of our alternate win conditions. This is one of the ways that if you have a larger table and it's going to be hard to deal damage to everyone, that you can win the game, and that's the Laboratory Maniac. It's very easy to draw your entire deck here. If you get to a point where you can go off and nobody can stop you, you just, boom, you just draw your entire deck, and then before they can answer anything, you've won off the back of your Lab Maniac. So, fantastic, fantastic inclusion here. Next we play Lotus Cobra for 1 and a green. You get a 2/1 snake with landfall that whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you may add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. Obviously, this is to help with when you're storming off. You know, you have a couple instants that are going to put more lands into play. This is just going to generate you more mana overall and help you really go off. Seedborn Muse also helps with that plan. For 3 green, you get a 2/4 creature spirit. Untap all permanents you control during each other player's untap step. So you get to keep up your shenanigans during your opponent's turns. So you can always have interaction up and always be able to stop what they're doing on their turn, and then on your turn you can try to go off. Or, even more spicy, on the end of your opponent's turn, if everybody's tapped down, that might be your window. Just storm off right there. However, you won't have access to some of the sorceries, but we'll see. Up next we have Spellseeker. For 2 and a blue, you get a 1/1 human wizard that whenever it enters the battlefield, you may search your library for an instant or sorcery card with converted mana cost of 2 or less, reveal it and put it into your hand, then shuffle your library. So this can tutor out whatever kind of piece you need to get. It can net you a ritual. It can do all sorts of things for you. Just, again, a nice little tutor to help you get to where you're going. And finally, the one kind of, like, threatening creature that we play that's going to make the table hate you, but, and again, this is maybe not a CEDH card, but if you ramp early enough and get him out early enough, it's also going to make your opponents just maybe hate tilt out of the game. That's Vorninklex, Voice of Hunger. For 6 green, you get a 7/6 with Trample that whenever you tap a land for mana, you get to add 1 mana to your mana pool of any type that land produced. And then whenever an opponent taps a land for mana, that land doesn't untap during its controller's next untap step. So, slows down your opponents, accelerates your lands, and when you see some of the ramp we're playing in here, you're going to understand that that 8 CMC mana cost is not really a problem. Not to mention, he is a 7/6 trampler. He can start to close out the game on his own, but I understand, having played against this card myself, how much of a feel-bad card this is to see your opponent resolve. But my solution for that, you got to play more interaction. So, you know, you got to take it as it comes. Next, on to the artifacts. Since we're talking about ramp, let's go there. Not all of these are ramp, but a majority of them are. We do have an Aetherflux Reservoir, 4 mana. Whenever you cast a spell, you gain 1 life for each spell you've cast this turn. Obviously, you see how Storm, that ties in together, because you're going to be chaining a bunch of spells together to get your Storm count up. You're going to gain a ton of life. And then you can pay 50 life to Aetherflux Reservoir, 50 damage to target creature or player, and you can just Death Star laser somebody out of the game. Fantastic. Another win con, or at least a way to keep your opponents away from you. Because if you're sitting at the point where you can fire that off and put any one player out of the game, you have a bargaining chip. They cannot anger you. They cannot come at you without them being put out of the game. So, fantastic, fantastic political card as well as win con. We have an Arcane Signet, 2 mana, tap, add 1 mana of any color in your commander's color identity. Really good. Chromatic Lantern makes it so all your lands can tap for any color, and then also you can tap it to add 1 color of any color of mana to your mana pool. I don't know why I'm stumbling so hard. Kalamax, 0-costed artifact that when it enters the battlefield, you're going to exile a non-artifact, non-land card from your hand, and then you can tap to add 1 mana of the exiled card's colors to your mana pool. Again, going to help you get out the gate quickly. We have Gruul Signet, Izzet Signet, Simic Signet. Those are all there. Non-mana rock, Isochron Scepter. Obviously, We also have tutors for instants and sorceries in here, and we have dramatic reversal. You get several mana rocks down, you get Isochron Scepter. That's an infinite mana combo with dramatic reversal under the Isochron Scepter. As long as you can generate more mana out of your mana rocks than it costs to activate the Scepter, which is 2, you can tap them all, float the mana, dramatic reversal, untap all them, do it again, do it again, do it again, do it again, do it again. Big X spell, win the game. Cool. Also, you are casting a copy of the card. So this does increase your storm count as well. So you can have a storm count of 1 billion and then just grape shot everybody out of the game as well. Don't forget that. So really like that in here. Mana Crypt, obviously one of the most premier mana rocks. 0 mana artifact that taps for 2, and then during your upkeep you flip a coin. If you lose a flip, it deals 3 damage to you. The other one being Mana Vault for 1 mana. It doesn't untap during your untap step, but at the beginning of your upkeep you may pay 4 if you do untap Mana Vault. At the beginning of your draw step, Mana Vault is tapped. It deals 1 damage to you. Tap it to add 3 to your mana pool. But again, you're trying to assemble this with the Isochron Scepter combo. You can tap it, tap it, tap it, tap it, tap it, and you're going to do all these shenanigans where you're just going to generate way more mana, and you're never going to have to pay the penalties. So, that is fantastic. Primal Amulet, instant and sorcery spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. So again, more reduction to stack with Brawl and Goblin Electromancer, but also it gets charge counters. When it gets to 4 charge counters, it's going to flip into a land that is going to be Primal Wellspring, and that will tap to add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. And when that mana is spent to cast an instant or sorcery spell, you get to copy that spell and choose new targets for the copy. Obviously, we're trying to copy instants and sorceries in this deck, so that's going to just add more fuel to the fire, basically. Next, we have maybe an odd inclusion if you're not familiar with Calamax, and that is a Smuggler's Copter. I know, weird, right, to see Smuggler's Copter coming back after all these years. But it's a 2-mana vehicle that you can crew it for 1, and it becomes a 3/3 flyer that whenever it attacks or blocks, you may draw a card. If you do, discard a card. Now you're wondering, why is that in here? Calamax only gets his doubling effect if he's tapped. This is a great way to tap Calamax, but also you have a card that can tap Calamax and then loot on an open opponent. So get in for a little bit of damage. Damage isn't really irrelevant. You want the looting ability, so you're churning through your deck, you're finding your pieces, you can get your combo put together. Obviously we have a Soul Ring, 1 mana, makes 2, seems good. And then finally, another way to tap Calamax, Springleaf Drum. For 1 mana, you get an artifact that says tap it and tap an untapped creature you control, add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. Now, there are a couple other different tapping things you can add, but none of them are as fast as these 2. The Smuggler's Copter and the Springleaf Drum are really the fastest of the fastest. You can add Cryptolith right, which maybe in a slower build is fine, and you could argue is fine in here, but that means you're going to be casting your Calamax, and then he has to sit out for a turn cycle. You have to hope nothing bad happens to him. Or you have to have enough counter magic called up that you can protect him no matter what. So I didn't go with Cryptolith right here because of that. And I do play a couple lands that we'll get to in a little bit that also tap him. So these aren't the only 2, these are just the 2 artifacts that are going to get you there. Moving on to sorceries, one of our big finishers, because again, we're looking to get to a point where maybe with 1,000-Year Storm we can make 6 or 7 copies of this, and that's Banefire. For a red and an X, it's kind of like a fireball. Banefire deals X damage to any target, but if X is 5 or more, this spell can't be countered, and the damage can't be prevented. So, this is a great, great, great way to finish opponents who can push through, you know, have counters that they're holding up, or whatever it may be. They can't stop this finisher. And I think that's a fantastic, fantastic thing. One of the best doubling spells in the game, in my opinion, is Bonus Round. For 1 red, you get a sorcery that says, until end of turn, Whenever a player casts an instant or sorcery spell, that player copies it and may choose new targets for the copy. So, when you go to start your combo, you want a bonus round first, and then all of your other copy spells that you're going to be playing in here you're going to copy the copy spell. So then you're copying more copies, and you're copying copies, and you're copying copies. And you see how this gets out of hand. So a really, really fantastic inclusion in the deck. Epic Experiment is one of the cards that I'm kind of iffy on, but also this card is just so spicy. For a red and a blue, an X, exile the top X cards of your library. For each instant and sorcery card with converted mana cost X or less among them, you may cast that card without paying its mana cost, and then put all cards exiled this way that weren't cast into your graveyard. So, it's a great way you got the infinite mana, you can just cast out everything in your deck, and you get to do all sorts of bananas things. This card can probably honestly go, but it's just so spicy, and I always end up cutting this card, and I wanted to give it a try here. There is probably something better you can be playing over the Epic Experiment, but I have a pet love of this card because I always cut this card, and I want to give it a time to shine, so to be. So, but there are so many X spells in here that it's probably not going to do as well. So cut this card if you find something else you want to slot in. I think this is one of the first things you cut, but I'm saying that now after designing the deck in almost like a fever dream kind of design here. So Fabricate, 2 and a blue, search your library for an artifact card, reveal it, put it into your hand. Get you your mana rocks if you already got your Isochron Scepter. If you need your Isochron Scepter, here's another way to get it. You can also, if you wanted to, you could cut the Epic Experiment for whatever of the mages, I can't remember which one it is off the top of my head, that can search out Isochron Scepter. So you can go that route, because Isochron Scepter is, 2 mana? I think there's a mage that searches in that area. There might not be. I think Trophy Mage is 3 or less, so you could go there. I'm not certain. Don't quote me on that. Oh. Editor, make Trophy Mage appear. Am I right? Am I wrong? Please annotate around it. So you have that. Faithless Looting. Obviously, you're trying to get into your combo pieces. And it has flashback, so again, that helps with the when you want, like, if your Song of Creation fizzles for some reason and you need to restart your hand, then you flash this back, you draw 4, you discard 2. Seems good. And on top of that, it's just going to help you dig into the pieces you need. Again, another card that you could maybe cut, but I really liked the idea of just storming off with this card. But again, this is probably right up there with Epic Experiment in yeet this card out of the deck. There's something better I can be playing to make this even more even more CEDH, and that is Genesis Ultimatum. Look at the top 5 cards of your library, put any number of permanent cards from among them into the battlefield, and the rest into your hand. Exile Genesis Ultimatum. Obviously, if you storm that off, you're going to put a whole bunch of stuff, into play, or a bunch into your hand. You have different ways to win. At the same time, the deck is about a third non-permanents, so it can be kind of hit or miss. But I do like this card, and I think storming off with this, like a 1,000-year storm cast of this when you have 5 or 6, would be absolutely hilarious. So that is one to look at. We have Grape Shot, which you wouldn't be a storm deck if you weren't trying to Grape Shot people. For those of you who don't know, Grape Shot is 1 and a red sorcery. Grape Shot deals 1 damage to target creature or player. It also has Storm. When you cast the spell, copy it for each spell cast before it this turn. You may choose new targets for the copies. So obviously we're trying to get a storm count of roughly 1 million. And then Grape Shot everyone out of the game, but most likely you're going to get to a point where you're doing this in the late game. And so you just want to get high enough that maybe you Grape Shot out the last 2 players, or at least one. Definitely not the most powerful of our finishers, but a finisher nonetheless. Speaking of finishers, we also have Ignite Memories, which is a much more bonkers storm card. For 4 and a red, you get a sorcery. Target player reveals a card at random from his or her hand. Ignite Memories deals damage to that player equal to that card's converted mana cost. Storm. So, this is like Grape Shot on steroids. Obviously, you have an opponent that's open-handed. They're hell-bent. This won't work. But when you put 30 of these onto the stack with your different copy abilities and its own copy ability in Storm, you can definitely cheese some people out of the game, especially if they're sitting with, a bomb that they're about to cast on their next turn. They have some 7-8 mana bomb. The elf player's sitting on a Crater Hoof in hand, or the demon player's sitting on, some big demon threat or something like that. And just suddenly, even if it's just, 3 or 4 damage each time, that adds up real quick. And again, if you are able to, in the same Storm cycle, Ignite Memories and Grape Shot, that could be enough to end the game right there. So that's another fun way to go about it. Speaking of other Storm things, we have Mind's Desire. For 4 blue, shuffle your library, then exile the top card of your library. Until end of turn, you may play that card without paying its mana cost. Storm. So, obviously, when you're trying to get to your other finishers, this is a great way to find your finishers. So, with all of your mana and ramp, you can, slam this down and start doing some bonkers things when you can start casting the rest of your Storm stuff for free. Next we have, so you stormed off once, and you killed a couple people, but it didn't win you the game. Don't worry, we got you covered, fam. Mizzix's Mastery. 3 and a red, exile target card that's an instant or a sorcery from your graveyard. For each card exiled this way, copy it. You may cast the copy without paying its mana cost. Exile Mizzix's Mastery. But you can also overload this for 5 and triple red. So, when you overload, you replace each instance of the word target with the word each. So this becomes exile each card that's an instant or sorcery from your graveyard. For each card exiled this way, copy it. And you may cast that copy without paying its mana cost. So, you storm off once, you don't kill him, it's okay. Wind it back, do it again. There you go. Suddenly, they're out of stuff. They're out of life. We have a obvious staple of the format, or of the deck archetype of Storm. That's Past in Flames for 3 and a red. Sorcery. Each instant sorcery in your graveyard gains flashback until end of turn. The flashback cost is equal to its mana cost, and then also this has flashback for 4 and a red. So again, if you storm off once, you got to storm off some more, or you want to keep your combo going, because we do have some stuff we'll get to that are rituals and stuff. Obviously, this is going to be one of those things to help you there. Also, again, with Song of Creation, if you fizzle, this is a way to restart because you flash back, and then all your stuff has flashback, so then you can finish drawing your deck. Little bit of cantrippy fixing. We have Preordain. For a single blue, you get a sorcery that's scry 2 and draw a card. So obviously, this just helps you fix, find, dig, whatever you need. For the most part, we are playing the normal interaction you see in CEDH, where it's a lot of counter spells. We do have a couple board wipes we'll get into, but one of the ones that I think you needed, very importantly, is Vandal Blast. You got a lot of people doing a lot of broken things with artifacts, and you're doing broken things with artifacts, but it doesn't destroy your artifacts, so who cares? So for either a single red, you can destroy target artifact you don't control, or for 4 and a red, you can destroy each artifact you don't control. And this can just be the crux in your opponent's side that sets them back, and suddenly they can't play. Up next, we have a Wheel of Fortune as our final sorcery. Obviously, this card has been getting more and more bananas expensive, and it's on the reserve list, so guess what? Guess we're not playing it. Unless we already own one. But for 2 and a red, it's just a wheel. It's the original wheel. It's each player discards his or her hand, then draws 7 cards. That's fantastic. And red doesn't normally get things like that unless they're rehashes of this card. So, obviously, sometimes we storm off. We need to, refill. This is one way to do that. Instant-wise, we are playing some really cool cards. We're going to just go down the list here in alphabetical order as we have been for all of this. Autumn's Veil for a single green. And a lot of you are used to Summer's Veil, so you're like, what is this? Autumn's Veil is an older spell from M12, but it's a green instant that says spells you control can't be countered by blue or black spells this turn, and creatures you control can't be the targets of blue or black spells. So basically, this is a way to, when you're going to go off, make it so that the minute your opponent tries to, drop their counter, you just sneak this in, and you're like, how about no? And then suddenly, your stuff can't be countered unless people are playing, like, you got the white player who's playing Lapse of Certainty and Mana Dive. Oh no. So, this gives you the protection to go off and do your combo without worrying about your opponents interacting or interfering. Blue Sun Zenith. Obviously, if we're doubling up instants really easily, this can draw you a lot of cards. Can help you also draw your whole deck. However, it'll shuffle itself back in, so you won't draw your whole deck. You'll just draw your entire deck except for the Blue Sun Zenith if you are late enough in the game. But for 3 blue and X, target player draws X cards, shuffle Blue Sun Zenith. Now, fun fact, if you're playing against self-mill, some sort of graveyard strategy, and their deck total's already low, you can just try to deck them out too. Especially if you can copy this 2 or 3 times. You just be like, okay, you're going to draw the rest of your deck. You're dead. So there's that. Brain Freeze is one of, I think, the coolest little storm wins you can get in here. For 1 and a blue, target player puts the top 3 cards of his or her library into his or her graveyard, and it storms. So obviously, again, another way to, if you have that player who's aggressively drawing cards, you can punish them by maybe storming off and making them mill out. So again, a nice little storm off win con, and it's an instant, so we get a bunch of our redundant copying effects off of Calamax as well. So fantastic there. One of our board wipes, Comet Storm, red X, multi-kicker as well. Choose any target, then choose another target for each time this spell was kicked. Comet Storm deals X damage to each of them. So you can just make this a big Comet Storm and maybe multi-kicker it just equal to the number of opponents and dome them all, maybe for lethal if you're at that point of the game. Or it's a way to just surgically extract problem creatures on the board. Different things you can do there with it. Cryptic Command for 1 and triple blue. You get an instant that says choose 2. Of those 2, you get 4 options. The first one being counter target spell. You can return target permanent to its owner's hand. You can tap all creatures your opponents control, and you can draw a card. So just a very flexible spell that'll let you push through your opponent's stuff or stop them from going off, I think is more likely here. You want to save that Cryptic Command for when your opponent tries to go off. Cryptic Command, stop them, and then suddenly you're able to go off because, you play almost the entire thing at instant speed. We have Desperate Ritual for 1 and a red. We get an instant that is add triple red to your mana pool. Splice onto Arcane if you want, but I don't think we actually have that synergy in here. But that is there. Dig Through Time. For 6, blue, instant with Delve. Look at the top 7 cards of your library. Put 2 of them into your hand and the rest on the bottom in any order. But more importantly, look at the top for what will usually almost always just be double blue. Look at the top 7 cards. Get 2, add them to your hand, rest to the bottom. Seems really good. Our Dramatic Reversal. Untap all non-land permanents you control. You stick this on Isochron Scepter, you have infinite mana. Seems good. A copy spell that is also stapled together with a win con. Expansion Explosion. The expansion side being copy target instant or sorcery spell with converted mana cost 4 or less. You may choose new targets for the copy. And the other side being red, red, blue, blue, X. Explosion deals X damage to any target. Target player draws X cards. So, obviously, a bunch of damage to an opponent's face, and then you get to draw a bunch of cards, or maybe somebody has a deck count low enough that you can damage one person out of the game and make another person draw their whole deck. You get a double kill with it. Pretty dope. Factor Fiction for 3 and a blue. Reveal the top 5 cards of your library. Each opponent separates those cards into 2 piles. Put one pile into your hand and the other into your graveyard. The caveat of this card being you're always going to know which pile is the best pile because you know what your hand is and your opponent doesn't. Fierce Guardianship, fantastic card. I chose to run this over Deflecting Swat because I just think this is all around better. I do think Swat's really good, don't get me wrong. I just couldn't find room for it. Maybe you could cut the Epic Experiment or the Genesis Ultimatum and you can play Deflecting Swat in here as well. That's probably really good. But we do have Fierce Guardianship, which is 2 and a blue. If you control your commander, you may cast this spell without paying its mana cost. Counter target non-creature spell. Seems good. Force of Negation. For 1 blue blue, you get an instant where if it's not your turn, you may exile a blue card from your hand rather than pay this card's mana cost. Counter target non-creature spell. If a spell is countered this way, exile it instead of putting it into its owner's graveyard. So again, another, counter spell that you can get for free. And speaking of free counter spells, we have Force of Will. For 3 blue blue, or you may pay 1 life and exile a blue card from your hand rather than pay Force of Will's mana cost, counter target spell. So a free counter spell, a free counter spell, and a free counter spell. Now some of them have a little bit more restrictions than the OG Force of Will. That's probably why it's currently sitting at like $130. But in CEDH, it's basically just preventing your opponents from going off and then going off yourself, but also you want to be able to protect your combo when you're trying to go off, so this is a great way to do that. Obviously, we're copying and copying and copying. We have a classic fork in here. For red, red, you get an instant that says copy target instant or sorcery spell, except that that copy is red. You may choose new targets for the copy. Frantic Search, nice little way to up the storm count. Also, dig you through your deck, draw 2 cards, then discard 2 cards, untap up to 3 lands for 2 and a blue. Seems good. Growth Spiral, again, just churning through your deck, maybe getting an extra land into play, getting you a little bit of ramp action as well. Increasing Vengeance, for double red, you get an instant that says copy target instant or sorcery spell from your graveyard, but it also flashes back for 3 red, red. So if this spell was cast from the graveyard, copy that spell twice instead. You may choose new targets from the copy. Mana Drain, for double blue, you get counter target spell at the beginning of your next main phase. Add an amount of colorless mana to your mana pool equal to that spell's converted mana cost. So, nice little way to get the mana to help you go off. Manamorphose, again, another staple of Storm. For 1 in a hybrid red-green, you get an instant that says add 2 mana in any combination of colors to your mana pool, draw a card. So it either lets you fix your mana off of your rituals, or more importantly, if you have one of your cost reductions, it's a 1 mana spell that adds 2 mana, so it ends up becoming a ritual. We're also playing Mystical Tutor, because we have certain instant sorcery cards that we need at specific times to go off, so we want to be able to get them. This card gets them. Narset's Reversal is really nice because it's a copy spell that returns the original back to your hand, so then you can cast it, the original card again if necessary. Then we have one of our other ways to kind of cheek out a win. We have Nexus of Fate. Obviously, it's an instant speed spell that takes an extra turn, and it also shuffles back into your deck. So with all of our you know, Thousand Year Storm and Calamax and all of our other, you know, cloning of spell things, we can potentially just clone this a ton of times, take infinite turns, and eventually we piece together the win while our opponents are tapped out and can't do anything. Pool from Tomorrow is another instant speed draw spell for double blue and X. Draw X cards, then discard a single card. Doesn't matter how many you draw. So absolutely love that card, especially if we can double it up. Then, you know, draw double X cards and discard 2 cards. Seems fair. Pyretic Ritual for 1 and a red. Add triple red to your mana pool. Seems like it helps out here. Twin Cast, copy target instant and sorcery spell. You may choose new targets for the copy. So again, a blue fork, basically. Then we get on to the lands. Now the lands are what really spikes this deck's price into the stratosphere if it wasn't already expensive enough with some of the mana rocks and other things that we're playing in here, like Force of Will. But we have 35 lands. We have an Ancient Tomb. Tap, add 2 colorless mana to your mana pool. Ancient Tomb deals 2 damage to you. Damage is irrelevant. We're trying to win the game. So ramp is going to help us get there. We're running a full suite of fetch lands. I will go over them just in alphabetical order as I go through the lands. But literally every playable fetch land we are playing because we want to be able to hit our colors when we need them. So Bloodstained Mire. Obviously we don't have swamps, but we can get mountains, and we have mountains that are on lands that are not just mountains, so again helps color fix. Boseiju, who shelters all, can make sure that our spells that we're casting are Boseiju, who shelters all, is one of those lands that can make sure that what we're casting isn't going to get countered. So if we need a specific card to be part of sticking in there as part of our combo, there we go. That's a way to make sure that it happens. Breeding Pool, Blue-Green Shockland, City of Brass, Command Tower, Rainbow Lance, Fabled Passage, Flooded Strand. We do play 2 forests. Hinterland Harbor, I did play the full suite of checklands in here as well because we're playing the OG duels and the shocklands. So I figured the checklands were the 3rd land cycle that we wanted to add. A couple more important lands. We have a Holdout Settlement. This is relevant because it either taps for colorless, or you can tap it and tap an untapped creature you control to add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. That, of course, is a way to tap your Calamax without him attacking. We have Ketria Triome. Yes, it comes into play tapped, but you can fetch it out during like your first turn, and then you have a rainbow land off the simple fetch. Mana Confluence, another rainbow land. Misty Rainforest, a pair of mountains, Polluted Delta, Prismatic Vista, Rootbound Crag, Scalding Tarn, Spire Garden, Steam Vents, Stomping Ground, Sulphur Falls, Survivor's Encampment. That's another important one because it's literally just a different name of Holdout Settlement. It does the literal exact same thing, so it's another way for you to tap your Calamax. Then we have a Taiga, Tropical Island, a Volcanic Island, Windswept Heath, and a Wooded Foothills to finish us off. I do not have the cards, all of the cards to build this deck, namely the pricier stuff. So if any of you do want to build this, please let me know how it runs. You know, what would you change? Please leave that in the comments below. Or if you just like this enough that you're going to build it. That being said, that's the deck tech. Thank you guys for watching. And we will see you guys next week. Peace.